Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest live event. And tonight I have Rebecca Nason all lined up in my virtual green room, and we're going to be talking about July's category for WildArt Photographer of the Year, which is called Human Nature. So we'll get to talking to Rebecca right after this. Hello, Rebecca.
Good evening, Rob. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you.
Absolutely. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. Really good.
Good. Hello. Yeah. And if you're watching this in catch-up, obviously you can't ask questions live, but do send me an email if you have any specific questions about the category, because I'm more than happy to to help you out. I mean, this is what this competition's all about. It's about trying to get everybody to enjoy the experience, and if we can do that by being more open and more inclusive, then that's basically what we're trying to do. So Rebecca, human nature, why don't we start by sort of describing the concept behind it, because we sort of talked about it for quite a while, didn't we? Because this really comes on the back of what we did last year, and we called it Backyard, and that was a sort of COVID related thing, because everybody had been shooting locally because obviously we couldn't go anywhere, and human nature is sort of I guess it's just sort of an evolution of that category, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So I still think it's very much part of that initial concept that we had, the backyard category, but it's a much broader one than that. So I think it encompasses a lot more. So it's still about sort of a meet your neighbors style. I think it's the appreciation of nature on your doorstep, the ability to you don't have to go on safari, you don't have to go on some incredible far-flung destination to photograph incredible subjects. You can find things and closer to home, and from your I think for me, human nature, it can encompass urban, of course, urban, backyard, garden, and it kind of leaks into environmental as well. As long as it has a human and a natural natural element in it, as long as you can see both, whether it's incredibly strong elements or very subtle, as long as they're there, it's there in some form, then I think
I mean, I think it's it's a category which is, I've written it down actually, it's a category is sort of designed to highlight the relationship between mankind and nature, and that can be in a positive or negative way, because obviously we have an impact, quite negative impact, in many instances on the wildlife around us, and I don't think people should shy away from showing that in their images either, because that's part of what this is about. It's about our relationship and our impact, with the other species that we share the planet with.
Yes, it is. I mean, it can be shown in a very harmonious way, because a lot of species have adapted to live quite seemingly harmoniously alongside man in kind of our environment, or it could be quite a kind of a damaged, upsetting, combo, really, of showing what can happen when you join the two forces together. They're certainly by no means always harmonious, as we know.
Yeah, I mean, it can create some really evocative imagery, can't it? I mean, you think of some of the orangutan images that that have been going around with the sort of deforestation of some of their habitat, and those well, not only photographs but horrible sort of sections of film that people have. Oh, it's just harrowing. But then again, I think this goes to show how important photography is in alerting people to what's going on, and the positive outcome that it can have for conservation, for example. So I think it's an important thing. Yeah,
it can have very strong journalistic and documentary style qualities to it, can't it?
So all of those things, it's quite a broad subject, and it's down to a degree, as all these categories are, to entrant interpretation. And for people out there, entrants out there, to show the judges something amazing, something they haven't seen before. And I think this category probably, well, probably more than any other that we've got, actually, has the ability to throw up those sorts of images. I'm really looking forward to it, I have to say.
Yeah, I think so. It's a real
Yeah.
skill set to be able to spot that type of unusual imagery in a more sort of man-made setting. And yeah, I think it's exciting. It used to be, I think, so the kind of urban garden bird style categories used to be the least entered categories, the strong behavioral, portrait style over those ones. But I think now it's really I see it really taking off over the last few years.
Exactly, and I think COVID perhaps has had a part to play in that as well.
Yeah.
Because you're right that people understand. I think competition entrants understand things like behaviour quite easily. Things like best portrait is another common sort of theme in a lot of wildlife competitions. And sort of things in their environment, however you want to sort of couch that. That I think people understand those quite easily, but something like this sort of human nature or urban wildlife, or that's an area, well, we were saying actually off air, weren't we, that's an area that we haven't as photographers ourselves and sort of delved into enough with our own photography. So
no, I find it incredibly exciting category.
Yeah.
And I haven't delved into it enough. I feel like I'm just on the cusp of entering into the possibilities. They're huge.
But
really.
isn't that the way though? This competition, that's something that this is about. It's about challenging and opening up new areas of photography to to investigate and have a go at. And I think
it's very inspiring, isn't it?
Exactly. That's what I want this competition to do. I want people to take people along on a journey and inspire them to look at different things. So that's why we sort of have these different categories and we try things like human nature, and obviously I've spoken about a few other categories that we're sort of thinking about for next year. So it's to sort of keep changing things around, and so it's not the same every year. So you're challenging people and you're taking them on this journey. So let's share some of your pictures. So what I've done is that Rebecca's sent me some images and I've got those lined up. I've got 2 or 3 of my own, and then I thought we'd go through and show people how much better the entries were for backyard than our own pictures.
Yes,
because there was some stunning stuff, and I think I've picked out a few that would work really well in this category as well. So just as an illustration. So yeah, let's get on and let's bring in some images so people can look at. Now I think this is an absolutely classic example of what we're looking for. Because you've got that, you've got that element of nature, and you've got it so beautifully framed on a man-made structure with a rope and that sort of ridge line or whatever it is of the metal roof. I'm assuming, going from sort of one diagonal corner of the frame to the next. And I said this is sort of, I think, sums this category up really well.
Yeah, I think it brings in the 2 elements very strongly, and it also. Yeah, the natural, the man-made. It's 90, nearly 80% man-made structure. And the birds kind of just within that. And I think we also like maybe the more artistic compositions as well. Obviously, and also showing that it doesn't have to be something exotic. It can just be what this is. Which, I mean, it looks like rock dove-like. It's as close as you can get to a natural rock dove.
Exactly. I mean, who knows what a rock dove is anymore?
A feral stroke rock dove. Yeah. But, just on an old abandoned ship at the side of a dock in Lerwick, and just shows that you can, those things are on the doorstep, easy to overlook, but they're there. They don't have to be as exciting subjects. They can just be interesting dynamics and
I think this is quite an interesting subject to explore, because in putting subjects into or on things that you would look at and go, well, that's quite ugly in a way. And well, yes, it is, but I suppose if you're exploring art, and this is what this competition's all about, it's not about perhaps putting a bird on the classic sort of spring blossom twig as we all like to do. This is something different. This is something completely
it's an urban alternative to a nice perch, a nice natural blossomed perch, isn't it?
I think it's so interesting, and it to me it tells a story, and I keep going back to this. Is images that have depth in some way or other, and it might be beautiful light, it might be textures, it might be telling a story like this image is doing. Those are the images that tend to last the test of scrutiny when judges are going through, because they don't just go through once, you know, and go, oh yes, no, they'll go through 2 or 3 times, and they'll let things settle, because we've got this judging system in place where we eat that, you know, loaf of bread in, you know, slice by slice as we go through the year. This is what allows this process to happen. And you know, those images that are those you know, that take a little bit more time to consider, you know, we have that time, you know, and those sort of storytelling images, they last the test of time. So
time is important, isn't it, when you're judging
it is.
competitions? It really is.
You're shooting a lot around, you know, Lerwick Harbour basically, aren't you?
Yeah, so this was in lockdown. So it started in lockdown when I just turned to Olympus, and so a lot of my imagery so far in the last 2 years has been based around the harbour. You know, so I've been utilising what's on my doorstep, and throughout the winter months, it's certainly reflective. You know, this category it kind of lends itself well to reflections, but also other man-made, reflections from man-made objects, but also just having a backdrop of some kind of man-made object, whether it's graffiti or, you know, or an interesting building, or, and in the case for me, my work
ships and boats,
ship.
But it's created that sort of unnatural, you know, colour in the background.
Yeah, very unnatural. It's kind of quite a lot of my images, it looks virtually on the borderline abstract, natural abstract in a way. But it's different, isn't it? They're different. It's an odd combination, but I think it works. It also gives that kind of more marine feel to it. Gives a sense of place to the bird as well, instead of it just a bird perched on a rope with nothing behind it. You know, it gives it a sense of its habitat, of its existence, doesn't it?
And I think if you hadn't included that sort of that triangle in the bottom left, you know, obviously where that's I guess the bow of the boat or something, you know, like that.
That's where it ends.
That's where it ends. You know, you can tell it's a boat. It's obviously a boat, and with the, you know, with the rope and so I think that's an important element to it, and it's just exploring these sort of artistic approaches and these different approaches. I think is, you know, this is what the competition's all about. So what I would say to people is don't be afraid, you know, to experiment.
Be bold.
Be bold. Yes, be bold, people. Yeah, that's what we want to see. We want to see something different. So this is another one I liked, and the thing I like about all the images that we've shared so far is this sort of bold composition. This sort of, you're not being afraid to, in this case, cut quite a bit of the bird off. And people, I wouldn't have thought to have done that, I don't think, but I think it really works because the main story here is that sort of barbed wire.
I think this is partly through necessity, but through what the circumstances of the image. But you know, I was certainly pleased enough with where the portion of there was enough amount of cuckoo to the right side of the barbed wire, you know, fencing there to kind of to hold its own, I thought. But this was a kind of very much an opportunist photograph 2 springs ago, when there was a bit of a fall of birds. Again, this was in Lerwick. It was in the town centre. I was just driving past, often using the car as a hide, as I do. I just noticed a cuckoo fly across the road. So I just did a very fast turnaround and kind of followed where it went. And it just went into a kind of a bit of an industrial estate. And I pulled over, and I was, you know, unfortunately at that time, I couldn't actually fit the whole bird in. I because of where I was in the car, with no chance of positioning myself, and the bird was not settled. It was moving through the town, so you know I just had to act really quickly, and I just concentrated on what I could photograph, making sure I had, you know, the exposure right, and I just managed you know, it's obviously such a long bird as well, cuckoo, you know, the tail, you need to have a bit of space. I didn't have a converter on, it was just a 300mm. So I didn't have anything to play with. I just had to take what I could. I took a couple of portraits and a couple of landscapes, but I felt there was enough in this to show an urban stroke human element with a very natural.
And I think the really important thing from a compositional point of view, yes, it's bold, but you know, have been in that situation where you can't include the whole bird, you know, I think this works really well because it looks, obviously it's been deliberately, you know, that's a deliberate decision by you as a photographer to cut you know, the big proportion of that bird out.
A third of it off.
Yeah, a third of it. But then it's looking into the space. You've positioned it in the frame, so it's looking. To my mind, you know, again, rule of thirds. Well, where's that? You know, it's just. But rules are there to be broken, and but what it is doing is it's looking into space, and I always think that's really important. You know, and there are so many images I've seen that were in beautiful light, and they had so much going for them, but the bird or the animal or whatever was in the wrong place in the frame, and it was looking into the sort of, you know, the short side, if you like. If you know, if it wasn't looking into the space, it was looking away from the space, and that, you know, and you look at some of those images, you go, oh, that's such a shame because it's such a great image. Yeah, it does.
The positioning of the angle, whatever way the animal or the creature is facing. Out, you know, you need a bit of space around the animal. I really find I really don't like tight crops either when you've got you know, I mean, I used to get very frustrated when I first was sending images to magazines. You know, I'd like to leave some space around my bird. You know, and you send it in, and when it appeared in print, it'd be like Bill like this on the page. It's like, no.
Well, because those are the ones that have impact, aren't they? But actually, you know, and this is a conversation I've had with some of the other judges, and obviously we'll get to talking about that when I talk to Josh in a couple of weeks. But those sort of environmental shots are probably the most difficult to pull off because it's really, because you've got those other compositional elements in the frame to consider as well as your subject, and then it's trying to get your subject in the right place, and as we say, looking into the space or doing, you know, in the right sort of orientation, and that's quite difficult because you know, you are at the mercy of what the thing will do, you know, to a large extent. So we're talking about sort of reflections and harbors and bringing in those sort of artificial colors, and I love what you've been doing with these sort of reflection shots in, you know, Lerwick Harbour. I assume this is Lerwick Harbour. With all the judges and with the way that they approach photography, I've taken bits from all of you and applied them to my own photography, the things that I really like, and the things that I really like that you've done are the reflection shots. You know, you're really, really good at that, and I've taken that and I've gone, oh, okay, well, I can play around with that, and I've applied it to situations that I have here. So no, I don't have a harbour with really colourful boats in it, but I've got lots of local lakes where the sun might catch a willow on the other side of the pond, for example, cast a lovely sort of golden reflection in the water, which, you know, I've had tufted ducks swimming in and out of, and we've got some nice compositions. So I've played around with those. So I think that, you know, there's things that people can take from other photographers, from competitions as a whole, and apply to their own photography, and said, keep this sort of continual photographic journey, which is the whole point of the competition. It's
a constant learning curve, isn't it? And I think there's nothing wrong with taking ideas and inspiration from other photographers. It should be encouraged, shouldn't it? Really, I mean, it's the way we all progress in our own fields is to do that. I mean, and like you say, maybe somebody's never really thought about reflective waters with animals in, birds or other wildlife. And then suddenly, once you've noticed whether it's man-made reflective water or natural reflective waters, it can be. You can just be. You can be bowled over. You can be driving along and then just look to the side and see the most incredible opportunities.
And it could be the most common subject. I mean, Idas aren't exactly uncommon where you are, aren't they?
They're very common.
And you remember the mallard from Aaron Todd, in light, with those sort of light streaks. And it almost looked like candles. He referred to them as light feathers.
Loved that.
I thought they were candles. And I tell you, that photograph was really well received, and rightly so. It was a fantastic photograph, but it's a common subject. It's got that, it's got that sort of man-made element in the light, so that would work really well.
I think there were some lovely examples, and that was certainly at the top of my list of yes, in that category, in the light category. And I think that's right. It can be. It doesn't have to be daytime, does it? Or for a start, it can be reflective waters from a pond to a lake to the sea in the daytime. But the opportunities at night, if you happen to have it, the opportunity, whether if you've got artificial lights reflecting into water habitat with birds or anything on it, then those opportunities are just there to be taken. How beautiful are they? Those nighttime artificial light shots. It's the same with it reminds me of, say, pied wagtail roost photographs in supermarkets.
Oh yes, and airports as well.
At airports.
Yeah, those sorts of things.
And fairy lights, which are obviously man-made structures within trees, giving you lovely bokeh effects.
Exactly. I said great opportunity for bokeh. This is,
isn't it? Absolutely love that. So there's plenty of opportunity, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. So again, staying with Lerwick Harbour, I'm assuming.
It's the same thing. It's the same theme at the moment. I need to get out more.
but actually, I think this is an important point, and a point I've been making a lot is if you concentrate on a local patch, then I think you get a lot more out of it, because you get to know places intimately, and you get those sort of opportunities coming up. You make the most of the opportunities that present themselves, rather than sort of going here, there, and everywhere, and finding nice scenes, but you don't necessarily get the most out of them in one visit. I think keep on going back. You get more familiar with things, and I think that's a really important lesson to learn. Actually,
it is. It's easy to flit to something else and something else, instead of actually concentrate on one area where the possibilities are probably endless. Really, in the space of a year, different subjects, different. It's a constantly evolving environment, whether it's man and nature or so in this case, this is for me, this was just taken last week. This is classic this time of year right now in Shetland. What's happening? Well, the light's better. You've got a common tern, which is the only one I'd seen, just literally come back from Africa. So you've got the odd common tern coming and just sitting up, and this one, and we're using the boat now. So instead of using the car as a hide, looking out at the reflective waters, I'm now out in a boat on the water, looking back at buildings as my man-made backdrops instead of ships looking the other way. So for me, this is very much an image of the times, and it just shows you that that this image wasn't possible until a couple of days ago. The bird wasn't there, the light wasn't there, and the boat couldn't be in the water because of the rough sea. So now that everything's come together, then you have different opportunities, and that evolves the whole year, doesn't it? A constant changing.
It does, but again, it comes back to knowing when these things occur. So it's knowing your local patch, and I think that's so important. So I think that sometimes people look down on sort of their local patches as not being relevant, or not being as relevant as going somewhere exotic, and I think that's a real shame. I think there are so many more opportunities, I think, to create some really artistic stuff from stuff that you've got on your local doorstep, because you know it so well. So take advantage of it. It's all about art. It's we're not necessarily focused on exotic birds, mammals, whatever, because one person's exotic is another person's regular haunt, because this is an international competition.
I love high key. I love white backgrounds, black backgrounds. If I get either of those, I'm a happy lady. So it was lovely to have that in this instance. We don't get really snow on Shetland, so I never get it by using snow. So it's just interesting to use a railing, and when you've got overcast skies, sometimes it's bright but overcast, or even slightly foggy, then you can get some interesting kind of white backgrounds.
Exactly. So and it's going out and shooting in different conditions, isn't it?
Oh yeah, very much so. If anything, I think naturally I warm towards more poor weather conditions and overcast skies than I do your lovely sunny bright days, because with the subject matter, I photograph a lot of white birds like gannets,
they're really tough.
They're tough when you've got bright sun, and you like the more subtle the more overcast skies often lend themselves much better to getting the detail in the plumage. Yeah, and I find it more interesting to have a bit of gritty atmosphere. I think this kind of I picked this particular one too because of the lines in it. It just reminded me of the fact that that man-made artificial structures can be very bold, very strong compositionally, can't they? Much more so even than nature, which can be a little bit more, softer lines, softer.
And it's that contrast, isn't it? It's not just a contrast in terms of the tones and textures; it's contrast of shapes and everything else. So yeah. I love this. I love that sort of, that such a beautiful bird. And such a great bird to see, and then you've got this sort of ugly element to it, but it's almost like Beauty and the Beast, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I loved. This was a very much a opportunist shot on Fair Isle a few years ago now. Again, a migrant passing through. It was evening time. It was nearly dark actually, so I was surprised to get any sharp images. I was really chuffed that I got a couple of this long-eared owl, which were. But it was. I just rounded a corner of a croft garden, and there was an old bed. An old bed had been sort of like dumped in the backyard, and there was an owl, sat on the rusty springs, and I mean, a weird mixture.
But I like the background too. I like there's it sort of complements the the springs in a way.
Yeah, kind of cemented up
tonally,
old wall and stuff, and I thought it's quite different in that way, isn't it? Very much, I think, an urban shot. When I was thinking about this category, for example, I remember some photographs, amazing photographs of dippers sat on. An old
we had that in. And the other one, of course, is gannets with sort of nylon twine and things like that. They're using for nesting material.
Yeah,
those
exactly.
Sorts of things.
So it doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be a huge element. It could be, a beautiful gannet nest with gannets on, maybe displaying or doing something, or with chick or whatever. But if it has the rope or the the man-made element entwined within that, I mean, it tells its own story, kind of tragic story, really, of using rubbish as nest material, but at the same time it fits the category perfectly, doesn't it?
Exactly, and it's documentary, isn't it? I mean, it's also like birds nesting in outbuildings, in old tractors and things like those sorts of things we've seen quite a lot of, and they can be really interesting. And I think if you've got something compositionally that provides real interest, and as I said, it's got this story behind it, and I think that can do quite well. Yeah. So explain the background to this.
So this was taken some years ago now, but obviously they're quite eruptive species, aren't they? So when if it's a bad berry year in autumn in Scandinavia, then you can get quite big movements of waxwing appearing. Shetland is a great place for them because it's the first stop off that they come to before they head south. But this was while I was living in Suffolk, and it was a really good year for them, a bad year for them in a way, but they were making their way south looking for berries.
This been about 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Because I remember it was about 10 years ago because I remember photographing them I didn't photograph, I saw them in a Sainsbury's supermarket car park, which is an absolute classic because they use a lot of cotoneaster and they like the berries. So you get a lot of them coming into car parks to strip the berries.
It's supermarket car parks. In cul-de-sacs or estates and supermarket car parks where you've got either got the cotoneaster or you've got rowan trees, rowan berries,
that sort of thing. Which is why that sort of out of focus brick wall in the background works so well, and that's why it tells the story. If you know the species. But I thought I'd throw this one in. So this is giving it a slightly different angle, and obviously this is a black bear in Canada, and I, they when I was there, that we saw a lot of them crossing roads, and it surprised me that I wondered actually how many, I don't have a figure for it either, are involved in in road traffic accidents, because it must be a hazard. And I wouldn't want to crash into a bear, to be honest with you. Don't think it would be very happy afterwards.
I don't think you come off that well, maybe.
No,
with the bear, sure.
No. So I just thought this was this bear just did this in front of me, and what makes it is that car,
Yeah.
obviously on the
I was
horizon.
going to say that. Yeah, it really
And it's
does.
got its
doesn't it?
headlights on as well, because actually you can't tell, but it was quite dimpsy when I took this photograph, because that's generally when you see bears is in the sort of late afternoon, early evening, and and the lights going.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one was just sauntering across the road, and I just thought it tells a story. You know,
Yeah, it does. It's nice
did that
composition
bear?
too.
Well, I mean, the bear made it across the road, obviously, and the car would be able to see it clearly. But it's it just tells a story.
It does. Yeah, I like that a lot. I like the fact that you've got the lines going back, across the screen like that too. It's nicely set in the frame. I love the little. You can see the underneath of his paw too on the
And his
back.
back leg.
Can't
Yeah.
you?
Exactly. And this sort of draws a lot from sort of landscape photography in a way, in terms of sort of leading lines and everything else. And I think you can learn a lot from looking at other genres of photography. So street photography, landscape photography, whatever it might be, portrait photography. It's always good to look outside of, perhaps your own comfort zones, and look for other ideas. But anyway. So
Well,
that's
what's
the
nice
reason
as
I
well is
included it.
all my shots were like, with a 300 mil or whatever, and quite close up to the species in that way with telephoto. But like you say, here you're starting to broaden it out, so you're actually encompassing more habitat with a species in it within that category, and as you can with, the category can encompass, macro too, and other, interesting to see what styles come out from it.
So this was again sort of working on reflections, and this is on the south coast, black-headed gull,
Lovely.
but it's just in the reflection of houses that are close to the water's edge. And I just I like the ripples, and the way they sort of create these patterns, and it's something you've done quite a lot of, and this was, as I said, was really inspired by some of the work that you've done. So
I love it.
when you see these sorts of things, you just think, oh no, that's a great opportunity. I know it's a black-headed gull. I have millions of pictures of black-headed gulls. They're probably the most common thing on the coast, on the south coast, but it doesn't matter. It's not about the black-headed gull necessarily. It's about everything else that's around it.
Yeah. Within a completely, obviously man-made element there that's dominating actually the whole image. It's lovely.
And anyway, I said I shoot quite a lot on the south coast, and in the winter there are lots of Brent geese. And for those that know Portsmouth, we'll probably be able to make out in the background here, Spinnaker Tower. So if you get it at sunset, quite often the geese will be flying sort of to roosting spots, and you can underexpose and just create silhouettes of not only the birds, but that sort of out of focus cityscape behind them. So you're putting them in context, and you're adding that man-made element. So that's
it's lovely.
And 3 is always good. 3 is always a good number. Okay, but what I thought we'd do is share some photography that came into Backyard last year, because to be honest, that some of that stuff was just so brilliant and would work so well, in urban nature, because it just fits the brief really well. I can't remember what's up. So the first one was a really surprising shot, actually, and this is from Chabadoroxy, who you remember won the best sort of portfolio prize last year, because he kept coming up with stuff like this, and this is astonishing. This is a Japanese silk moth, and it was on the window outside a sort of village hall, I think it was, at a local wedding. But what an amazing thing to capture. It's that artificial light that's attracted that moth, so there's interference from sort of man-made elements. And then you've got, I mean, look at the way, this girl, the way her leg goes around the wing. I think this, when you look at tiny little elements like that, and when judges are judging photographs, they look at these sort of small elements, and that's what makes a winning image over, an image that doesn't do so well. It's just tiny little things. And I remember the discussion about, the shape of the leg around the wing. It's just amazing.
That's shockingly beautiful, isn't it? To see it, the skill in seeing that, and then to be able to take an image of that quality, and the composition is beautiful, the lighting's great. It's a very well taken image, isn't it? It's very, it shows a real, ability there, doesn't it? Really, it's stunning.
It does, and there's such a story. There's such a story to that. Okay. And then, again,
Mm.
this image from Peter Hudson, who
Yeah.
got bronze, I think, wasn't it, with
Mhm.
this image last year. And this, we eulogized about it at the time. And
Mhm.
I remember, we had quite a chat with Peter, in the awards presentation, and this sort of, I don't know, sort of, it was almost, it tells such a story, doesn't it? It's quite sort
Yeah.
of metaphorical as an image, this sort of dead butterfly in the bottom of a bucket,
Yeah.
which was fading away, but that sort of round shape in the bottom of the bucket, almost looking like, you're looking at the Earth from space. And I just think it was, so emotive.
Very emotive. Yeah, yeah. There were so many elements there, really. It's so
Yeah,
striking and bold and modern, and with the square format, and the butterfly. To have seen that, and to have seen, and also to have caught the sort of the decay of the body and caught it at just the right time when you've got just enough of the butterfly showing. Yeah,
yeah,
we loved it, didn't we?
yeah.
It's
It's,
incredible and very evocative, like you say.
Yeah,
Quite
and I
very.
think, if you've got a brain that thinks that way when you're looking at sort of compositions and you have these opportunities in front of you, I think that's when you see something surprising as a judge,
Mm,
then, and you think, oh, I wish I'd taken that, because
mm,
it works in so many ways. That's when I think you're onto something. So
yeah.
thinking a little bit outside the box and being brave in what, and this goes back to what we're saying about being brave in what you're taking. If
Mhm.
it's, not everybody wants to see a dead animal or an insect or whatever, but there is still a beauty to be had in some
There is.
areas,
Mm,
or a story to be told.
mm,
So don't, be
yeah.
bold.
Be bold. This is
Be
very
bold.
strong. I thought absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
I've seen images of butterflies and other insects in forms of decay within ice before, but never, which is very much in, yeah. But this having the urban or man-made element,
the
which is,
elements. Yeah,
is
well, it's just that perfect
not out
combination. So it
there.
would work really, really well in this category. Okay. And then obviously another
Mm,
image that we really loved, and is Khurram Khan's skunk. And if you've missed the desert island pics I did with Khurram a few weeks
mm,
ago, then do go and check that out, because that was a lot of
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
He's a great guy, and he's a fantastic photographer. So yeah,
Mhm,
we had a really good chat, and shared some great stuff. But
yeah.
again, this is in his back garden. So this
Mm.
is as local as you can get. And this took a hell of a lot of planning. If you remember the conversation we had with him at the
Yeah, I
time
do.
in the
Yeah,
award presentation,
yeah.
and the use of flash here as well is just so subtle. It's
Subtle,
just,
but
yeah,
absolutely perfect. Mm.
yeah, and
It shows real skill, doesn't it, to take an
it
image in
does,
that like that,
it does.
and
So,
foresight to have seen the
yeah.
potential in it. Yeah.
So I just think it's, the framing of it is brilliant.
Mm.
This was a camera trap, so obviously he was down. It was down to luck to a degree, how the animal presented itself. But I know he took a lot of images
Mhm.
over a long period of time to get this, the one that really worked with the tail up and it looking at the camera, and it's
Yeah.
just you'd have,
Yeah.
I'd have been so pleased to have taken that. So
Me too.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so again, it would work really, really well in this category.
Yeah. With a lovely
Uh,
subtle porch backdrop. Mm.
Yeah, and then this is really clever, talking
Mm.
about sort of city lights and sort of out of focus city lights creating bokeh and everything else. And this is obviously Jan Pico, as image of a bridge spider, I think, or a garden spider or something. I can't quite remember which species, but
Yeah.
again, sort of seeing the potential of that, because these lights were over the other side of a river, and he's
Mm.
taking this, in a, it's on a bridge on the other
A bridge.
side.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's creating those patterns with the lights is really clever, and putting it into silhouette, so what it is. Obvious straight away it's a spider,
Yeah.
and your eye goes straight there, but then it
It's very
goes around the
dynamic.
frame. Yeah,
Very dynamic image to have seen that, to have yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's very
it is.
it's kind of abstract urban silhouette. I mean, the night use of nighttime light. It's just
Yeah,
beautiful, isn't it? Very
yeah.
different.
Do I must go out at night with my camera,
Mm.
just looking at
I need
these
to as
images.
well.
Yeah. Okay, I think the next one's Jan's as well,
Mm.
actually,
Mhm.
because I mean, I really loved this, and he's been doing this project on urban raccoons in Germany, this sort of feral population of urban raccoons, and this again, you know, would fit this category so well. I mean, that is just so skillful. You know, those sort of elements in that frame. It's just so it tells such a story, and your eye keeps going around it. As I said, you know, the whole point was to give you an overview, whether you're watching this live or whether you're catching up with it, with the recording of it, is to give everybody an overview as to what we're going to be looking for in this category. And it is that relationship between, you know, humans and wildlife, positive, negative, however you want to portray it, but having both those elements telling a story, or you know, combined together in some way that produces something evocative, beautiful, artful, you know, and any of those things. So so that's basically, you know, what we're looking for. So I'm hoping that's given people a really good idea of what the category is about.
As long as those two elements are in there, it can be incredibly bold, creative, sort of, you know, sort of geometric image using structures, or it can be, you know, a well photographed, you know, it can be, you know, well photographed urban fox just given in a creative, different way. It's just about thinking slightly outside the box for even the most common subject matter.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you so much for the time. It's really appreciated. So it does take a you know, a little bit to put these things together, and of course, you know, this is time that you're giving away. So thank you very much for that. It's really appreciated. Okay.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope that's been inspirational. I hope you've enjoyed the photography and the conversation. And if you do have any questions, if you're watching this and catch up, then do feel free to email me. I'd be more than happy to answer anything that you throw at me. Anyway, so thanks very much for watching, and until next time, bye-bye.